they only want to bring players in that they genuinely feel can grow with the club and make them into title challengers.
Yeah.
I think Osimhen does fit that bill if you take him at face value on what he's produced in Napoli and now Galatasaray.
Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is Inside United with Laurie Whitwell, Manchester United correspondent for The Athletic. We are back. It's been a massive 2 weeks. Loads to talk about. We're going to get into transfers. We're going to be looking at Kobbie Mainoo's contract. We're going to be looking at Mason Mount coming back. So much has gone on with the stadium. Just the general future of Manchester United is a completely different thing to what it was 2 weeks ago. It feels like there's so much to get through. But before that, Jay, how are you?
I'm good, man. I was gutted I missed the last one, so it's good to be back.
It was a weird vibe without you.
Was it?
Was it better? Was it better?
No one said weird.
Yeah.
People said great vibe.
No, sadder. A bit of a sadder one.
It didn't have the same pop, maybe, shall we say?
That's because you like Pepsi Max.
He knows his stuff.
That's the pop we're talking about, fizzy pop. It had all the sorts of pop you want from a content perspective. But no, we have got loads to talk about today. And actually, I was thinking about this. I think this might be the first episode that we've done that could have a generally positive lilt.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean?
Speaking of pop.
Yeah, nicely done.
Speaking of pop.
That's
Everything else has been like, isn't it terrible? This is worse than we thought, X, Y, and Z. We've actually got some exciting things to talk about. But before we get into that, let's start with something bad. Ayden Heaven.
Okay.
He isn't bad, but his injury is. However, there's been kind of mixed reports on... At first, it looked like potential broken ankle, ligament damage, all that sort of thing. Then we heard and saw, I think, Andy Mitten, obviously your colleague on Talk of the Devils, said that he left Old Trafford in a boot, but unaided, so no crutches, he walked out. What's the latest with Ayden Heaven?
I think that the severity of the injury that we all thought it was when Sky, I was watching at home, weren't showing the replay, the kind of reaction, the fact that the stretcher came out, we're all thinking that's long term. We're thinking Lisandro Martinez, we're thinking Ahmad, aren't we really? But yeah, the initial signs of him walking out of the stadium with a boot, but unaided, I think was positive. I've since been told that he's been at Carrington without the boot. Yeah. So, there's been no definitive prognosis made. I would want to urge for caution on kind of coming out definitively, but I certainly think that there is a hope that it's going to be, weeks rather than months.
We'll see him again this season, hopefully.
I would think so, just based on everything that I'm hearing. But like I say, they're still waiting for the absolute diagnosis. But I think it's a lot more positive than the original fears, and so I think that's a good thing because he's obviously been, he's only had a few matches, but he's been really good in those matches. So if he can be a player for the rest of the season, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we had it in our news this morning. I think you were quoted. I think it's been everywhere, that story, from you originally. It's been in the Metro and other papers as well, been sort of reporting on it. But it does show how important it's becoming that brief space of time, doesn't it? Because, like you said, like the Sociedad game was a must-win, and he played in that and played very well, and obviously gets his full Premier League debut. How important do you think it is to get him back as soon as possible? Because he looks like someone that the manager obviously likes and wants to use.
He's just been very calm, hasn't he? Sort of stuck to his tasks with strength and with quality. The bringing the ball out from the back is a key component of what Ruben Amorim wants. The fact that he's left-footed and can play on that left-hand side is obviously important. He's only 18, and certainly I think he's been accelerated into this position by Martinez's injury and Yoro's injury, Maguire's injury. You go through the team.
Johnny Evans' injury.
Johnny Evans, of course,
never ends, does it?
as well. So, but nonetheless, I think sort of credit to United for actually going for him at this moment in the season. I think the original plan was looking at the summer when he would have been out of contract with Arsenal. They've obviously paid a little bit of compensation fee, $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that, to get him in now. And I have to be honest, I was sort of sceptical about it being a first team signing when I sort of saw it because he'd only played like 10 minutes for Arsenal, but clearly he has got good enough ability to play at this level, and I think it's been a really promising start for him.
Obviously, we don't know what his whole career will be and how long he'll be at United and all that stuff. But I like that for once United have scouted a player that has played like 10 minutes of football. And even from that and from obviously other data and other knowledge that they have.
Yeah, played a lot of youth team, hasn't he?
Yeah. But the people judging that were able to distinguish between someone that, well, he's only played 10 minutes, so he must be bad, or we don't know, to actually, we know he's only played 10 minutes, but we think he's good enough. And very early days so far, but it does seem as though that judgment was maybe correct. Like, he's looked so composed. Feels like in the past we'd get players who have played 200 games and still not quite know who they are or where they fit or how they're going to work at Man United. So it's a nice sort of step in the right direction. Just quickly, you mentioned there that this is something different. I've not heard anyone talk about this. Is Johnny Evans just done? What's happened there?
I was told. I think it's his back that's an issue. I don't know the full extent, but it feels like, how old is he now? Is he 36 or 37? He came when he was 35, didn't he? Because his number on his shirt was 35. Helpful for us to remember.
He turned 37 in January. So
there we go. Yeah. So I don't know. I haven't heard anything about him coming back. So my thought on that would probably be, don't necessarily count on him, but. Yeah, clearly he's served United really well since he's come back. Again, more than I think we thought. You think back to that Aston Villa game. Erik ten Hag selected him to start the match when it was clearly a match that was crucial to his future, and he played brilliantly, didn't he? Stepping out from the back, and so you could see how he would fit in a back three, really. So if he is fit before the end of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually came back and featured.
Yeah. Just moving on then to some transfers. United have we're in this weird mode at the minute where. Feels like everything is just going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. On the pitch, off the pitch, it's disaster, and then it's really good, and then we've got no money, and then we're spending 2 billion, and it's like just so much is happening. One thing that, obviously, the transfers in the summer is a big part of that, and Amorim getting this rebuild. A player that we've spoken about on here, and I think you said on here in the past, United were keen on, and it was widely reported. Geovany Quenda from Sporting Lisbon, obviously a former player of Amorim's. 17 years old, incredibly highly rated, versatile, winger, wing back, full back. In the last week or so, it's been announced that he's going to Chelsea. What are the details of that Chelsea move? And do you know why? I don't want to say he was taken from under our nose, but why have Chelsea got him and why haven't we got him when we seem to have that advantage of his former manager being at United?
Yeah, I thought if you'd put a gun to my head, I thought he probably would end up joining United. Yeah. Certainly, people at the club felt that at one point as well. I think sometime after the January transfer window, and there were obviously talks exploring what that move would look like. Ultimately, it seems quite a decisive factor has been the fact that Chelsea are loaning him back to Sporting for another season. Right. There's no way on this planet that United would spend 50 million euros, I think it is, something like that, on a player and then loan him back to a club. They just don't have the finances to do that. So they have to, if they're spending money this summer on a player, they have to be ready for the first team right now, really. So I think that was a crucial point. Also, there was probably, after it felt like it was going to happen, there was some debate, I think, over the cost that it would take for, at that point, a 17-year-old, he's turning 18 in April, another teenager. They've obviously got quite a young squad already, Yoro signing, Dorgu, Ayden Heaven. They obviously went quite young, didn't they, in the summer, even Xerxes, 22, 23, Højlund, Garnacho, Mainoo. So they've got like a lot of young players. Was putting another young player into that team for that kind of money the right thing to do? Clearly, they obviously rate him as a player. Ruben Amorim rates him as a player. He put him into his team at 16. He knows what he can do. He understands the system. Although it is interesting that he has been playing more as a winger for Sporting since the switch to 4-4-2, since the change of managers. And Chelsea, I think, are putting out the noise that they see him as one of those wingers. It's like they have a lot of wingers, but
they love wingers, don't they?
Yeah,
at Stamford Bridge.
So it's an interesting one. I mean, listen, a young player is available for transfer. Chelsea are obviously going to be interested, and they've put the money down, and Sporting have got him for another year, so they're happy with that, and he gets to move to Chelsea. From what I'm told, I think United were aware that was going to happen, so they could, if they really wanted to step in and make a move, they could have done so, but they obviously elected to pursue other opportunities.
Do you think we'll still be in for a wing back in the summer, or do you think it was more a case of we wanted that one, or we need that position filled? I know we've got, is it Leon coming in?
Yeah, Diego Leon,
and obviously we bought in Dorgu, sorry. Do you still think there's business to be done now?
I thought they would do, just because it's such a crucial role in the team, and you have a specific set of criteria really that you need to be able to fulfil to match that, and it's so crucial to Amorim's success. I think having wing backs that absolutely can do what he wants, and you probably need more than two really, because of the number of games, the athleticism that it takes in the Premier League. Amorim's been touched on that recently, hasn't he? That's something that they felt they had better than Real Sociedad, for example, and he knows that he needs to increase that. So I thought maybe, but there's also, I'm hearing noises about central midfielders, in terms of energetic box to box, and obviously a striker. So they're going to have to weigh up where their priorities lie. Because I suppose Harry Amos, we saw him make his first start against Leicester. I think he's certainly a player that's got the potential to play for United at some stage. Again, he obviously has got this opportunity because of injuries elsewhere and suspension for Dorgu, but so you sort of again having to sort of wait and see how he adapts to that. But so maybe they've got some opportunities in the academy. There's obviously other players I think that we've touched on. Benito Mantanto, who scored against Arsenal in the FA Youth Cup. I think some people sort of see him as maybe being able to do that. Jadon Sancho as well. He's really good right wing. He scored against Arsenal as well. He was sort of right full back. So, but they're young players. They're 17, 18. So it'd be interesting to see where they end up putting their money, because obviously they've not got a huge amount of it.
No, we've got a lot to talk about with transfers, and you mentioned a couple of positions there. Just like you said there with the athleticism thing. That was the big shock. We said it after the first leg against Sociedad. Like, we looked quicker than them, and it's so rare this season we play against a team and we're the quicker, more athletic ones. It seems like every week you play teams like Brentford and Bournemouth and Chelsea, and you play teams and you're like, they're just quicker and stronger and faster than we are.
Even Southampton were. I know I always go on about that game, but it really annoyed me.
Sulemana certainly was, wasn't it?
and what Dorgu did down that left-hand side, I know he didn't score or whatever, but I thought you immediately saw a player that, on the attacking-wise, he's there, but defensively, and I don't mean to pick on Luke Shaw in particular, but that sort of, he's got past me jog that Luke Shaw sometimes does, where the winger's going towards your centre-back and he's like, I'm never going to catch him, so there's none of that with Dorgu. It's like, I'm going to get you and I'm going to win the ball back myself. And I felt like a whole different feeling to him being there to, seasons gone by. So hopefully, that's clearly something United need to work on. In terms of other positions, you mentioned central midfield there. What are you hearing in terms of priorities and potentially even players within those positions?
Well, it's just the fact of Christian Eriksen. He said this week, hasn't he, that he's going to leave in the end of the season. He's had 3 years at the club, which I think is probably more than everybody expected, even when he signed the contract. So, they're going to have to replace him. You've obviously got still a little bit of a question over Kobbie Mainoo, which we might get onto in a bit more detail. Yeah. Casemiro is a player that's actually had a bit of a renaissance, right? Yeah. And he's got another year left on his deal, but clearly he earns a lot. So I think from Sir Jim Ratcliffe's point of view and other football executives, shifting that out of the squad when he's not playing, he's not starting all the time, is he? So no. I know he is now, but it's sort of circumstance, and maybe he'll actually have quite a productive and meaningful end to the season, because you could see how certainly in the Europa League he is, could be integral to it. But they obviously just, and Mason Mount, he's come back now, but he still hasn't featured yet. I thought he might get on against Leicester. Ruben Amorim said he wanted to give him 5 minutes. In the end, he didn't. But I thought it was a situation where you could have seen him replace Bruno Fernandes, for example. But so they've got all these question marks over that position, really. And I still think that Ruben Amorim wants athletic midfielders that can go up and down all day, really. And United have, I guess, missed that for a long time, really. Even Ten Hag would have wanted that, right? He never quite got what he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a few names, obviously that centre forward position is an obvious one, because we're just not scoring. None of our attackers are particularly prolific. I say particularly prolific.
Turn the corner after Leicester. Rasmus Højlund.
This is the moment.
Yeah. What was it? Rashford got 2, Xerxes got 2.
Nice 4-0 win. Victory.
Yeah, exactly. It was a statement. The statement is, it's not going to be this good for 3 months. That was the statement.
I didn't actually give the definition of what kind of statement it's sending.
But there's been loads of names mentioned. You've mentioned Liam Delap on this podcast before, in terms of someone that could be an option that seems to tick a few boxes. Victor Osimhen is someone that just won't go away. He's doing very well at Galatasaray and kind of seems to have a bit of the profile. He's not a Gyökeres exactly, but more kind of straight line kind of player, fantastic in front of goal, great finisher, but isn't like some dribbling build-up kind of guy. Then Ekitike is another name that's been mentioned in the last couple of days. Is there a particular profile, is there particular names that you think United are keen on? How do you think that's going to look going forward?
I think clearly all of those must be taken absolutely as options. A striker that runs in behind is what I've been told, which obviously Rasmus Højlund does do. It's kind of like
that was his goal the other day.
It's. I suppose it's just having the confidence to do it and then the ability to finish it off. So that's a sort of another level to what Ruben Amorim would want. But the essence of it being someone that can threaten the channels and obviously hold up play is essential. Being able to control the ball and bring others into play, and clearly Højlund's probably struggled at that area, hasn't he? More recently, whereas Xerxes does thrive on that, but then you really do need the number 10s to kind of burst beyond him because he's not really that runner in behind. So yeah, I mean the Victor Osimhen one is interesting in that you sort of think his wage is not going to be too much for what United want to do. That they have got a really clear agenda for bringing down the salary cap really. Although United's salary to revenue ratio isn't that high really. It's quite low really compared to the rest of the Premier League. So they've got room if they stop overspending on players and losing money via the debt repayments. But yeah, in terms of what they want from a striker, I think Osimhen would fit that bill, right? I mean, he's obviously got records from Italy and now Turkey as well. He's done it in different arenas. Okay, maybe it's not quite the absolute elite level yet, but so I wonder what happens there. The only thing is, Napoli, how much would they want for him, and would some kind of transfer swap make some kind of sense? Obviously, they've been interested in Alejandro Garnacho already. I think I don't know. I wouldn't rule out something like that potentially happening.
Do you think United could look at free transfers, players out of contract? There's slight talking like someone like Jonathan David. I think at Lille's out of contracts in the summer. Maybe I'm not saying him, but someone like that, or some of players that are out of contract because of the finances, because we're so skint.
I think you've got to look at that, right? I think they would be foolish not to. I think we've sort of mentioned Angel Gomez, obviously, on a free transfer, hasn't he, coming home. I've not really got anything recently that suggests that is something they're looking at, with any great attention. But yeah, I mean, at this stage, I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to sort of think, okay, we've got a certain amount of players that we need to get rid of. We've got a certain amount of money. A free transfer would make a lot of sense. But I haven't got any particular names for you, Jay.
No, so we'll get you on it next time.
Yeah. I'll now
as we get closer to the window, we'll start miming.
I'll start thinking about that one.
Just to go back to Osimhen for a minute, he's an odd one, isn't he? Because Napoli spent loads of money on him. Yeah. Was it 60 or 80 million?
Wasn't he like the most expensive? Or one of the most expensive African
and then
players ever.
He was the most
expensive African player ever at the time.
And then he had this sort of kind of upward trajectory, culminating in Napoli winning the league. Then last season, he got 17 goals in all competitions, which isn't bad, but it felt like he became sort of weirdly ostracised almost at Napoli.
Did not fall out with them.
Didn't they troll him, like their own official social media?
It was quite bad, I think.
Trolled him, which I think, forgive me for getting this wrong, like had racial connotations as well. It was just like, this is bang out, and this is the actual club, like official account.
And De Laurentiis runs that club, doesn't he? So he's very powerful figure and very kind of set in his ways, and that was actually the reason he was a name brought up in the summer that Højlund joined as a Kane. Osimhen was the kind of these are established elite players, and there was basically, it felt like no real sort of thought to engage with Napoli because they just thought De Laurentiis would.
And also they're notoriously difficult, aren't they? Like, do you remember when Koulibaly was being rumoured at like 100 million euros for like 5 years in a row?
Yeah.
You think like he was an alright player.
Well, this is it.
He was like 29 and they were quoting 120 million euros.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
Absolutely.
United just thought that negotiating with De Laurentiis would not be a fruitful, use of their time.
I wonder if the McTominay going the other way will grease the wheels a little bit in terms of that relationship. But then obviously, so I know everyone knows this, but then Osimhen goes to Galatasaray in this bizarre transfer deadline day, like he might go anywhere. Like he's literally like spinning the thing, what club comes out? Oh, it's Galatasaray, like one of the most highly sought after strikers in the world, who has been scoring goals for this team, was a talisman of their first league title in 30 odd years, is now literally just anyone can take him. That was a bizarre situation, wasn't it? And that surely must bring the fee down a bit. The fact that he is currently on loan at Galatasaray means that all is not completely well with Napoli. Do you think United could be taking that into account?
Yeah, I think so. Like I say, I think finances will come into play with all these things. They only want to bring players in that they genuinely feel can grow with the club and make them into title challengers. Yeah. I think Osimhen does fit that bill if you take him at face value on what he's produced in Napoli and now Galatasaray. I just know that De Laurentiis is obviously a tricky character to talk with. But as you say, they obviously managed to get a deal with Scott McTominay sorted where United seemed like they got a decent fee. So let's see if they can sort of reciprocate.
There seems to be in a bit of that with United. Wasn't there like issues with Daniel Levy at Spurs where they were like, we don't want to get into negotiating with him.
Certain people that
it's going to be a nightmare, and you know,
which I would say, come on, that's your job. Like, you're supposed to be able to negotiate with these people and figure it out and push the right buttons to get what you want. Now, I accept there's a reality to that, and I guess United felt that it wouldn't be a good use of their time over that summer trying to negotiate with somebody that then maybe not even come. They had to get a striker, and they knew that Atalanta would sell Rasmus Højlund, albeit they ended up paying a lot more than I think anybody was expecting them to pay.
We need some real psychology moves in there. Trick him into it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do like some of those old school 1980s dating techniques.
Go on.
Like going up and going, those shoes are shit. How much do you want for Osimhen? Do you know what I mean? And immediately he's on the back foot.
Off kilter.
Neg him. Do you know what I mean? Get in there, make him think, hang on a sec, this is oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, have him. Do you know what I mean? Something like that. Something, you know, that kind of Donald Trump style, pull his hand when you're shaking hands with him.
Yeah.
Make him accidentally put your ice cream cone in his nose.
Broadcast the negotiation where you just kind of bully him.
Go Facebook Live.
Oval Office.
And completely just do him in.
Gang up on him.
Yeah, gang up on him.
That's the way to do it.
You haven't got all the cards.
Yeah, you've got no cards. And then you open a deck of cards and every single one is a picture of his face. And it's the Joker. And he's finished. And now he's just a puddle of shit on the floor. And you can get what you want for what you want. Unbelievable.
I presume we've seen all those AI, clips of that encounter. You could definitely do an AI encounter.
Yeah, we're just punching him in the face and then he melts. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. I mean, obviously, if United, you need me in the negotiating room.
I think I was about to say you should
pitch that.
As long as you pay my expenses,
send you down there. Yeah,
that's my rule.
You don't leave any negotiation without at least coming out even, do you?
Yeah, absolutely not. Or with my own down my trouser leg, because sometimes it does go very wrong. High risk, low reward. That's my motto. Right, let's move on. Kobbie Mainoo. Speaking of negotiations, there's a couple of things at play here. One is he's for sale, in quotes, if the right offer comes in. The other is we're trying to get a new contract for him. What is going on with both of those things? How do they work together? And where are we up to with this potential new deal?
I think it's a very interesting topic, and the point at which there's going to be talks about a new deal is because the deal that he signed was before he really emerged properly, and I think it did have inbuilt increases in it. So there's certain markers that he hits, and then you get more money. But I still think that him and Alejandro Garnacho are probably below what you'd expect given what they've done since that point that they signed those contracts. I could be wrong. I don't know the exact figures involved, but I don't think that United are paying excessive money for either of them, and so therefore it naturally brings up the conversation, okay, should there be a new contract offered based on the status that he's now got? The thing is, he's got 2 years left on his current deal, so 2027, and then there's a +1 option in the club's favour, so from their point of view they're kind of protected, but you can see that's why then there's conversations around, okay, if we give him this contract, that's going to be his good contract for another 5 years, you'd probably expect. So they've got to make a decision whether that's what they want to give him, whether, as we've already spoken about, there's options for him to leave the club in the summer, and clearly the FFP, the PSR calculations, getting money into the club, he would obviously be a hugely valuable asset, I think. So yeah, it's a real interesting sort of dilemma, I suppose, at the moment, what to do over all that.
Are you hearing much about some of these figures that are being bandied around? Because you keep hearing it's like up to almost 200 grand and all the rest of it, and it's a lot of
I got a very, when I asked about that, I got a very strong rebuttal to say that is not true.
Right.
Okay, it's one source, but I would trust this person, and so very strong rebuttal. So I think just adjust your perspective on that, I would say. I've from my experience of Kobbie Mainoo, I would be surprised if he's kind of I know it's not him, but going in there with a kind of determination and a set amount of money, you have to pay me this. I think it's clearly going to be a conversation around, well, I've done this for the club, should that be then recompensed really in my salary? Christian Eriksen's leaving the club this summer. I think he's on a pretty decent wage because he joined on a free, so that's going to free up some money. So you could maybe see them saying, okay, well, if he's departing, should some of that not come to a player that is going to be playing, week in, week out? But then ultimately, Ruben Amorim's view would come into this, I think, as well. How much is he going to be playing him? Does he definitely fit what he wants from a player? I think he changed, or he's changing his mind on Garnacho. Maybe he's certainly speaking positively about him more recently. we've not had that opportunity with Mainoo because he's been injured to sort of hear what his latest sort of thoughts on him are. I guess he wouldn't have any change on that, what he's seen previously, because it's been a few weeks now. But I think it was interesting that Sir Jim Ratcliffe said, we will not sell any players, young players, based on financial needs. But I think the caveat to that is he doesn't rule out potentially selling young players if they, as a club, think that that's the best thing from a sporting point of view.
That's what worries me, Like, I'm a little bit worried about Kobbie Mainoo because I want to see us keep him. I'd hate to see him leave.
Agree.
I just worry with the fact he's been injured for most of the season, basically. The fact that this seems to, these stories about his wages and all the rest of it, and it just feels like, are we getting to a point where maybe he could be sold because he's obviously got quite a good value as well. He's a player that you can get some decent money for, and it'd be almost an easier pill to swallow for a lot of people because of the things I've mentioned. Where for me, I'd be gutted if he went. I really would.
Yeah. I agree, because I think this is what United should be about, right? From the area. He's wearing a United kit when he's like 4 years old. He's looking cool as hell, and he's obviously done bits for the team that are memorable. Scoring that goal in the FA Cup final, like what a moment! And so you want that history to be sustained through the years, really. And he obviously is a smart guy, a nice guy. Like you can tell he's a good person to have around the place. But yeah, I just wonder what ultimately the club would view on it. Because I've sensed that the people that are now running the club, they obviously definitely give a nod to the history and the heritage of the place, but they obviously want to write their own futures. They don't want to be harking back to the past, and I think we're seeing that with the stadium and other aspects of the club, the redundancies, and so that then I think does become a factor in the football team.
I feel bad for Mainoo as well, because he was in an initial cluster of players who it wasn't obvious where they would play in an Amorim system. Yeah. You can put Garnacho in there, maybe even Bruno in there, Harry Maguire in there, Rashford in there. But with all the rest of them, other than Rashford, they've been given, because of their availability and fitness, they've been able to play themselves into a conclusion. So we kind of know Bruno can work as an 8. He's been fantastic there recently. Harry Maguire looks very serviceable as an 8. Even Casemiro, he's looking like a decent player again now. Garnacho, we've tried him on the left, it didn't quite work. We'll try him on the right. Oh, that's a bit better. Mainoo's been injured, so almost that initial worry of will this work has been kind of locked in place, and he's not been able to prove either way whether he can work in the system. And I hope that the summer transfer window doesn't arrive before he's had the chance to show Amorim how he can work, because we just started experimenting with him as a number 10.
Yeah, there's that game, wasn't there? In Bucharest,
and if he'd have had 6 games there, we might be saying, bloody hell, we could put Ahmad at wing back. Mainoo works up there, alongside Garnacho, a bit slower, a bit more methodical. Garnacho's pace and winger a bit we might know by now, and I worry we'll get to the summer and go, I'm not sure Mainoo works in this system, let's sell him. When actually he never had the chance to show because of his injuries. That would be the most disappointing thing for me. Speaking of injuries and the lack of availability, Mason Mount. Still loads to talk about, by the way. We've still got loads of Mason Mount. We haven't even spoke about the stadium in Ratcliffe, but that's all going to come up as well.
Great stuff.
I can't wait. I just had a minute thinking, I'm really excited for the rest of this podcast. Right, sorry, carry on. I know, yeah. How pathetic.
You love
Mason,
your work.
I do love it, it's great. Mason Mount, you were one of the first to report that he was back in training. He was back in the squad again the other day. Do we know where the club stand on him? Because he's the opposite of Mainoo, kind of, or Garnacho. On paper, it's obvious where he fits in. Hard-working, relatively athletic, industrious number 10. Perfect. We'll see you behind Rasmus Højlund. And yet he cannot play, hasn't played at all. Do you know where the club stand on him at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd take the first point being Ruben Amorim, and his answer after the Real Sociedad game was absolutely emphatic, wasn't it? I love him. He's doing everything right off the pitch, and therefore we will treat him as best as we can as a club. He's getting all our attention, that kind of thing. So clearly there's a lot of understanding there on both sides, and clearly the club would want it to work out. I mean, I think he's on a good wage as well, so obviously they want that on the pitch. He was one of the players that Ratcliffe mentioned in terms of the current salary level of the team that's available to Amorim is like kind of mid-table. I'd need to check that that's definitely the case, but you can see how a lot of players have been out, and Mason Mount being one of them. I don't know. I think you probably struggle if you decided, okay, we need to sell him. You're going to struggle to get a high value for him because he's not really featured that much for 2 years, and so you might as well just see if he can actually, now they've given him absolutely the time to recover, whether they can utilise him. Hopefully he gets some good game time before the end of the season.
Just to follow up on that, do you, like, when someone gets an injury, or you go, right, okay, let that heal, come back. When you've been injured almost non-stop for 2 years, do you know what's going on? Is there anything going on behind the scenes of, like, why is he constantly being injured? Try to kind of get to the root of what's happening here. Because he went from a player making 45 to 50 appearances a year. He had that pelvis injury at Chelsea. Then he signs for United and can't stay fit for more than 3 games in a row. Are we getting to the root cause of this, or is it just, let your hamstring heal and we'll see you in 3 months?
Well, I think the one that happened against City was he hyperextended his leg and then got a hamstring injury. So that's sort of almost an unfortunate incident rather than it's not repetitive motion. It's like he's stretched for something and it's not worked out, and it's caused an injury that's kept him out for 12 weeks, I think, in the end.
Okay.
So a long time. But yeah, there are questions. They've asked the question about why is this happening? Because you've got a big asset here, clearly a very talented player. Why is he not able to get on the pitch? One thought that I was speaking to somebody in the game sort of pondered was whether the fact that the Chelsea thing happened, he got the pelvic injury, but there was no indication. He was playing a lot of games for Chelsea before that, and obviously won the European Cup with them. But then at United, he's asked to play different positions, and so it requires sort of different athletic output from you in those moments. Okay, I know that you should be able to be versatile, but when you're combining that maybe with not starting every game, because then he started, didn't he, against Wolves and the start of that season, but then he came out of the team, didn't he, I think, when Bruno Fernandes was sort of back properly. So yeah, is that part of it? I don't know. They are looking at it and trying to figure out what's gone on, and we're seeing a shift, aren't we, in terms of the medical department. Again, more departures. Gary O'Driscoll, who's only been at the club as the doctor for sort of 18 months, or head of performance, I think he is now, and Jim Moxon as well, who was there for sort of 2 years. Eric Ten Hag had the same issue. He wanted Gary O'Driscoll in earlier in that pre-season and ended up coming in September. So he felt that was like a bit of a setback for what he wanted to try and do with the medical team. I don't think there's any quick fix and one identity that then can solve all the medical issues, because players do get injured, particularly in this, frantic calendar. We've seen at all clubs players getting injured, but clearly there's little tweaks that you can make for individual cases where you can keep them fitter for longer, and that's what United are trying to figure out.
I do feel sorry for Mason Mount, because it's just not worked at all, has it, for him? And it's not his fault he keeps getting injured, and you saw that derby, Manchester derby. He looked like he was about to burst into tears. He just looked gutted, didn't he?
Just come back.
I know, he come back, big game like that, starting it. I know, you think that's a show of faith from the manager.
He's dropped Rashford, he's dropped Garnacho.
Yeah, you're in.
Do you
know what I mean? And he's just come in again, and he ends up having to leave after, 20 minutes, whatever it was. It was quite early on in the game, wasn't it? So yeah, I'd love to see him back in a United shirt and just see what he's about, because I just feel like we don't know whether he's good enough for United. You'd think he could be, because of what he did at Chelsea and their Champions League win. He obviously played a big part in that, but it's like the jury's still out, almost 2 years in. It's a shame.
It is a shame. Another human that...
Good segue. Where are we going with this?
Another human.
Who could he be thinking of?
I might try and start using a segue that is just the segue I use no matter what. So maybe something like another happening on Earth. Do you know what I mean? Something that's like...
The vaguest.
It's just so vague. Another planetary indiscretion. Do you know what I mean? Just any kind of... Just something.
Another thing.
Another thing.
Yeah, but that's boring.
Okay.
Come on, don't be ridiculous.
Another. Sorry. Where are you going with this?
Well, basically, I want the widest, broadest segue that I can possibly have, so it can become my catchphrase segue.
Okay.
So instead of saying like another thing, because everyone uses
another
that,
event in the solar system.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But then again, what if we're talking about, Andromeda Galaxy?
What about just a generic something else we can talk about?
I've got one. Galactical goings on.
Okay.
So in other galactical goings on, Luke Shaw.
Oh, okay.
Now, he was back in training. You love it. He was back in training, and then there was a report. It came out the morning of it. He's out for weeks and weeks. And then there was this sort of like pushback seemingly from the club of like, actually, maybe it's not as bad as this. That was 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And is he even back in training? What's going on with Luke Shaw? Where is he?
we haven't seen him. He wasn't in open training ahead of Real Sociedad, which obviously our opportunity to see with our own eyes. I haven't checked in recently on what his latest is. Just at the time, I remember asking that question, and I was told he'd be back sort of training that Monday. And it was a small thing. I think they're just absolutely wrapping him in cotton wool. There's obviously little indicators that they're seeing that aren't, giving them confidence to put him back into it full time, which is what they had a big sign off on Mason Mount basically to say get him back in, right. And clearly they're not at that stage with Luke Shaw, but it is it's troubling really, isn't it? Because it's been bizarre. A long time.
It's been so long. Like it's what was it? Over a year since he started a game for United.
Yeah,
that's absolutely crazy. Let's move on then. We've got loads of stuff still to talk about. Stadium, Jim Ratcliffe interviews, sort of general change of direction for Manchester United. You were at the event where they sort of showed the models. You've seen those little plastic models up close. First of all, how were the models?
They were very delicate.
Were they?
And yes, very. You could certainly see a little cottage industry in making United stadiums. I think quite a few people would be up for going to like a little.
They should release
National Hall
because they did the Lego Old Trafford, didn't they?
Yeah,
a few years ago. I wonder if they'll release
like models of the new stadium?
Lego version of the new stadium.
Yeah, they probably will eventually.
Just a lot more pieces than
a lot more pieces.
Tridents and that.
What do you make of the whole thing? Is there any indication as to the feasibility of it looking like this, of the $2 billion? Are we any closer to who's going to pay for this? Where are we up to with the stadium?
Who's going to pay for it is the big question. We asked Omar Barada, the chief executive, about that. I sort of said, how could you have a... we're talking about sponsorship, we're talking about more debt, we're talking about Ineos and Ratcliffe putting his hand in his pocket, and Barada said basically all those options are on the table. I think he has to kind of keep his cards a bit close to his chest, back on the cards, but because they're a PLC, and so you shouldn't really be announcing anything major financially before you've kind of done it in a kind of more coherent manner for the shareholders. Although obviously some of the stuff that Ratcliffe said probably pushed the boundaries on that.
He says what he wants.
Yeah. Obviously he owns Ineos like basically wholly, so he doesn't have to answer to stakeholders. So this is a different kind of company. So I got the indication though that the sponsorship branding would definitely be a part of it, because it's kind of free money almost, and that might be unpalatable for a lot of fans who want Old Trafford just to be this pristine sort of named building, this kind of place where everyone feels very a lot of affinity to it, but they're clearly going to have some kind of attachment to a company, I think, and even probably to the point of maybe appointing different brands for different parts of it, so like the fan zone or I don't know, the mega store or something.
Very American sports, that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is it. I think that's what I felt this was all about. Where this is a departure from what Old Trafford has been before, which is hosting football matches. Growing organically throughout the years. It's not perfect, but it has a lot of history and memories. We want to do something totally separate to that, which is a global destination for people, so it kind of becomes a bit of a tourist attraction, like the Eiffel Tower, which is what Ratcliffe mentioned in his on-stage sort of talk about it, which, I would certainly have my own thoughts on that. I don't think a football stadium should be primarily that. He also, I did see an interview with Harry Robinson on MUTV or the United site, where he actually spoke a lot more warmly about the importance of fans being close to the pitch and the steep stands inside it, and wanting to make it an evocative atmosphere so that they can win matches there. I still just have concerns about going from Old Trafford to a brand new stadium where there's going to be a shift, isn't there? There's going to be a different vibe, a different mood. We've seen it at different clubs across the country where they've moved stadiums and it hasn't gone to plan. I know, for example, West Ham's, they had huge riots really there about sort of moving there, and a lot of anxiety around it. Yep. And I still don't think that feels like a football stadium. I don't think it ever will. And certainly from what Upton Park was, it's such a contrast. And okay, that was a repurposed stadium, whereas this would be specifically built for football. But I still feel like, even at the Emirates, that's been 20 years there, and it doesn't have that aggression that I think Old Trafford has. And Jim Ratcliffe mentioned the new camp and the Burnabout as examples as to, well, they've got these incredible stadiums that are new-ish, now, and we should have something like that. But obviously they built on the same site, the same stadiums that they've always had. So he obviously doesn't want to do that, and he said they've spoken to fans. I think it feels like, I don't know what you guys think, but fans are kind of 50-50 over a new stadium.
I feel like it shifted a little bit. I remember a few years ago doing something on the Beeb, and I was sort of not keen, but I thought a new stadium might be the way forward, to be honest with you. And I said that, and I got a lot of stick. And
you've been quite early on that.
Yeah, I was, because I just thought, I don't know, I get the idea. I love Old Trafford. I've had some of the best memories ever there, obviously, been going for 40 years. But it is falling apart. It is over 100 years old. There is a lot of issues there. I don't just mean the leaks in the roof and stuff, but even sitting, if you wanted to sit, I stand up, but if you wanted to sit down, it's like you're a bit squashed. It's not really fit for purpose. And I think, how many times can you keep revamping it? Plus there's limitations on extending the capacity, I think, because of the railway track and the canal. So I thought maybe a new stadium, your history goes with you. That was my opinion, that you can sort of carry that with you and we can move with the times kind of thing. So that was my initial thought. And I've noticed over the last year or so especially, it does seem that more and more fans are coming on board. I'm not saying I led the way, because there's a lot of fans saying it, obviously, but there seems more fans.
Trailblazer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take all credit for it, but a little bit. No, but there's more fans of, Andy Mitten's spoken about it.
Yeah, he's changed. He's
getting more someone who knows more about United history than him
and stadiums.
Yeah, and stadium. To be fair, he's been to everyone in the world.
He was looking at the gradient of the stadium in the new build and thinking, oh, that is a beautiful gradient.
Delicious gradient.
He could not wait. He was salivating.
The protractor came out.
Yeah. He knows his stadiums, and his gradients. So it was he's another one who's spoken about it, and I think that's kind of the gist of what I'm hearing from a lot of fans. There's still a resistance, from especially match-going fans, but even match-going fans, I think if you were to do a poll, I think they have done polls. I don't know how scientific some of these are, to be brutally honest, but I think that it's sort of tilted where the majority of people would be up for moving to a new stadium.
They did poll season ticket holders specifically.
Yeah, and even then, I think there was, but I think some people are questioning that. I don't know. It's very political at times. Some people don't believe it or whatever, but I do feel there has been a shift, and I think that now it seems like it's a reality as well. It's easy to sort of push against something you don't think is going to happen anyway, or argue for something you don't think is going to happen. But now it's like, look, this is going to happen. This is what we think it's going to look like when it could happen. What it's all about. I think more people are sort of getting, okay, now we could be sat in that stadium, or we could see United play at that stadium. Why not? Whereas in the past it's just been a sort of hypothetical.
Yeah.
My big thing as well is we've got the opportunity now. We might have it in another 10 years. You don't know, do you?
Yeah.
There's not always a chance. I mean, the Glazers were never going to build us a new stadium. No. They're just too busy taking money out of clubs to put anything in.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point in all this. No quotes from them, all Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
Yeah.
And so one theory would be, for him, Ratcliffe, to put more money in and get equity from the club from that, or even another sponsor, a private investment vehicle, put more money in and get equity from it. Would the Glazers accept United getting a new stadium with the club benefiting if it meant their shares were diluted? From what I'm told, I would be surprised if they would accept that, which is, again, another sign of why they're in the club.
It's interesting you say that, because I think I saw an interview of Ed Woodward with Andy Mitten in United We Stand, and it was one of the few things he didn't sort of brag about or go into as a new stadium. He sort of, at the time, was I think he was sort of, if I'm remembering it rightly, almost poured cold water on the idea that there was going to be a new stadium. And now,
because they've got so much debt already.
Yeah.
If United had no debt, you could absolutely just say, we'll get a loan out, get a big loan out. Obviously, I think Real Madrid did it with the Bernabeu, 3 different loans and good interest rates at the time. It's going to be more interest rates now because the world has changed. And the timing of it feels wrong, but it's taken someone like Ratcliffe to come in and say, this is what I want to happen. That force of personality, obviously, he's got some money. How much? If he put his own money into this stadium, I think that would also change people's perceptions of him, because it feels it's a little bit, well, it's definitely, he's talked about, he's obviously been
chants about him at the ground aren't exactly favourable, are they, if we're being honest?
Just like the Glazers.
Yeah, exactly. So
I just think the design of it, I just don't think it looks like Old Trafford. I don't think it looks like a football stadium. And speaking to the architects, it was really fascinating hearing from them, but it felt like the Tridents, were conceived by Sir Norman Foster and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and then kind of given out to the rest of the company, and they had to work with that. And the kind of idea that it represented the trident on the badge was an afterthought, really. It was actually the fact that they just wanted something that was so iconic or visual, that could it be identifiable wherever you were in the world as Old Trafford Stadium. That's where it came from, and then it was sort of retrofitted to this idea of the Trinity or the three. So I don't know whether that actually then sustains, but clearly their idea is to make it something that is so eye-catching that people instantly recognise it wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an idea, that's a good one or a fair one. If you're going to make a new stadium, it's not just going to be a slightly bigger version.
You don't
of
want it to be identical, do you?
And also, and I know obviously Old Trafford is iconic to look at in a way, but it very much looks like a stadium that has been built up in different areas over the years, and the roof,
the south stand certainly looks very
and whenever you see those like drone
three
shots of the roof, there's a bit of that kind of, just a hint of green mould on things. There's that hint of that's bodged, and one corner's all glass and the other corner's sort of brick and corrugated metal, and it doesn't have that like, we made a coherent piece of a stadium, and maybe that's part of the charm.
Well, I was going to say that's for some people, and they've had this throughout history, haven't they? I think I did a module on this at some point in my English degree, where the kind of contrast between organic growth and building something from scratch. So like in America, obviously they had the chance to build a whole country basically from scratch, where all the roads are kind of square and perpendicular, and for some people that's great because you can know where you're going at all times, but for other people they want that kind of more mazy route and more lived in experience,
where things aren't always designed to be as efficient as possible, but they're designed around what actually happens,
human emotion and character,
and sometimes things don't always make sense, so you do wander down an alley where you go, that's just turned into a dead end, but that's why
we want some dead ends,
but sometimes you do, because that's why when you go to Prague or an old sort of city, there's that kind of romance to it, and when you go to a kind of big rectangular city in America,
Las Vegas. Las Vegas has got its own charm,
but it doesn't have that same kind of like artistry and kind of poetry to it that some of these things. And that's something with Old Trafford. Like, you look at the old stadium, and yes, it's a bit kind of cobbled together, and the cantilevers on the roof look more like we had to do it, otherwise it'd collapse, rather than we came up with this concept. But sometimes that's what football is, and that's what you want. So I can see that both sides of the argument. There's a few things. There was that interview, I think you referenced it before, with Patrick Campbell, who's a architect for Foster and Partners on Man United's YouTube, that I thought was really interesting. It was like a 25-minute deep dive into all the different kind of models that they had, and a few new interesting things on all of those things. And I guess you would have spoke to people about some of those things in person.
So it was Patrick and Nigel Dancer was the other architect we spoke to.
So a couple of things on that. One, firstly, it doesn't look like the roof is closable, does it? From what we've seen so far,
no.
If
they've got the umbrella.
There seems to be a hole in that umbrella that there was never, you could easily have this like sliding part of the CGI where it's like, oh, we're just showing you that doesn't seem to be a thing. The switching out of the pitches doesn't seem to be a thing. Now, I remember times where you'd go to Old Trafford and there'd be fucking rugby league lines on the pitch that you could definitely still make out with that, early 2000 when they would play games.
Yeah, was it the grand final, whatever?
Yeah, and you used to be able to see it on the pitch for a few games afterwards. And you think, so they're kind of putting football first, and he said in that video, we're focusing on football, so we're not going to have the retractable pitch. And you think, all right, then, but you still do want to put concerts there.
Yeah, Coldplay and Taylor Swift they mentioned to us.
So how is that going to, are we just going to have a trodden on muddied pitch? The roof doesn't close, how are you going to have a concert there? Like all these things kind of, it's like we're putting football first, but also we are really just going to show off a lot about the other stuff Old Trafford will be. Do you think there's an element here that there could be a bit of contradiction almost between what they're saying and the designs and the reality of things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it'll ultimately end up. They have, obviously this is their, I guess, first showing of what they've come up with, but they are also talking about wanting to start work this year. And there's that element to it where Ratcliffe obviously wants government involvement in the broader new footprint that the club will have with the 17,000 new homes. That's a huge project.
Yeah.
I mean, and fantastic if they can make them affordable homes. But that's going to change that whole area massively. Also, even to sort of your point, the contradiction, they are talking about how 65% of people currently drive to the game, and they kind of want to change that. So there's actually not, you can see there's like not really car parks around the stadium, and they obviously want to recalibrate the transport links with the government support so that people arrive to the stadium via public transport more so than their own cars. Which again, you can sort of certainly see the sort of reasoning for that. We want the world to be a more, I guess, collaborative place, but at the same time you are kind of telling people how they should be arriving to and from a game. So yeah, I think that goes to it. I'd be fascinated to see what comes from this, because the next step feels like it needs the government to say, yes, we'll back it in this specific way for work to start. Because I mean, Sir Jim Ratcliffe said in his interview with Harry Robinson, he wants it to be 5 years rather than 10, because I might not be here in 10 years. And I think that's a genuine sort of thought, that he is in a hurry to make this happen because he wants it to be his legacy, right? Yeah. Where he's changed the club and got it back to winning ways and got a new stadium. It would be fantastic, wouldn't it, if the ideal view of all this is if United got a stadium that was absolutely fantastic and really did celebrate the club in a truest sense, and then they had trophies there again. But will he
imagine?
Will they actually be able to sort of bring it to fruition? The modules thing was interesting as well. The fact that they're going to have potentially modules coming down the Manchester Ship Canal.
They compared it to Meccano, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, I like Lego Meccano. Either
those
way,
little bionic
away
that used
from
to come in pods at Tesco.
Yeah,
Mum never bought me
Kinder
one,
eggs.
Kinder egg.
Put them together.
Yeah, it's called the Kinder Egg Stadium. That's basically.
Don't count it out.
The Nestle are a big company. Right?
Well, there you go. I saw there's a story this morning. I think the culture secretary Lisa Nandy was saying.
Yeah.
They want to move forward. The government wants to make this to happen sooner rather than later. There seems to be an eagerness from the government as well. I don't know
Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, spoke about it, didn't she, before this point?
They
as well.
seem to have made it a bit of a flagship. Their whole economy drive thing, getting the economy going. This is going to be a part of it. I've heard it mentioned a few times by Keir Starmer. So it'd be interesting to see just how that sort of transpires.
That's it. What do you actually mean by that? Yeah. It's sort of easy to sort of say, we want to build new houses. That's a huge thing of the Labour government. They want to build, residence for people. But okay, how will that actually work in truest sense? It was interesting. That was how it was announced by United. Manchester United backs the government's plan. It wasn't even we want a new stadium. It's we back the government's plan for new housing. So interesting framing.
It's another interesting. Speaking of galactic goings on, no, it's annoying.
I hope this doesn't get legs.
No, because
I really do.
It's annoying, that one, because what I want to talk about is actually very closely related to what you said.
The Bernabeu.
Broadening it too much. Oh no, that would have been even better.
Yeah.
No, when you talk about the framing of things, the current Old Trafford is right where that walkway is. That long kind of Wembley Way style walkway is Old Trafford right now. Do we know how that's going to, have they mentioned anything about, they said it might take a year to knock Old Trafford down? I heard that report. I don't know if they said that or if that's just
I've not seen that, but
a number that's plucked out of the air. This whole thing is going to be, United are going to be playing in the new stadium long before it looks like it does on those graphics, isn't it?
Sure.
Because Old Trafford is, if you imagine, I know guess you know this, but if you imagine that walkway down with all the shops and the buildings either side and the three tridents in front of you, that view right now, if you put a camera there, would be Old Trafford.
Yeah.
So have they explained how it's going to work in terms of they're basically knocking everything down around Old Trafford? We're still obviously going to be moving to the new one. Do we know what that's going to be like?
Well, yes, obviously where it is now is basically like the car parks, right? So they've got that. Yeah. People just have to figure out, I guess, important people like players and managers and coaches and the people that pay the big money for tickets would be sorted out, I'm sure. But poor journalists, I think we'd have to walk a bit farther to get to the stadium.
That's a joke.
World's smallest. I enjoy good walks to a stadium actually.
Okay.
But so they actually were saying that they could build this new stadium. And the back of it actually backs right up against the Stretford end, so they'd have to leave that till last. But they could do that. But it's a tight fit apparently.
Some of the top-down pictures. This is a bit sad. Me and my dad would literally send it on a FaceTime call, screen sharing, drawing circles on and overlaying the two pictures. And we were like, the back of the Stretford
high-tech FaceTime call I've ever heard of.
The back of the Stretford end and whatever the east stand of this new stadium is, are like on the same land. Like you said, so they're basically touching each other. How are they going to get this thing going over? Like,
they think they can build
all this, but
well, they think they can build the whole stadium and then add that last piece of Meccano at the very end and still be playing football. I mean, maybe at that point you'd have to shut down. Yeah. There we go. So I suppose if you've got not matches on,
interesting.
It's a fascinating sort of structural concept. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, Grand Designs will be all over this, won't they?
Yeah, I love that.
Hopefully they'll do a little documentary about it. I'd like to watch that.
Surely.
Bring him in. What's his name from Grand Designs?
I can't remember.
Kevin McLeod. Get McLeod in. Get him to go through with his hard hat. He got Ratcliffe hard hat, and that famous, the best moment on every Grand Designs is you can tell the couple are struggling now because they have spent everything. And
you need a couple arguing, don't you? That's what makes Grand Design.
Well, United have had a few arguments.
This is it. You can have seen Ratcliffe arguing.
They could supply some drama.
Trying to bring like a roof beam in the pissing down.
We've gone a bit over budget, but it's worth it. We've been sleeping on the streets for the last 4 years.
You've had the same T-shirt on for 9 months every time we've filmed you. So I hope it doesn't go like that.
The senior team have actually shifted to Lee Sports Village.
Exactly. Ratcliffe's had to move in with his parents because he couldn't afford rent on his house in Monaco. No, there's obviously so much going on there. Do you think that overall, this is just your opinion, obviously, we're just chatting. Do you
between us.
Yeah, I mean, do you like this? You don't seem to like it.
Yeah. I don't like the new stadium design. No.
Okay.
I just don't think it's. What about Manchester or United or football does it show? It's basically.
What would you have done to get that in there? Made of brick exteriors?
Well, yeah,
would it be?
Maybe I'm talking absolute rubbish and it's not possible. But surely you have flicks of Manchester's industrial heritage, the club's heritage. Clearly, if you're going to have it all built in modules, I guess you can't have red brick in terms of building it. But even that as a kind of outer layer to kind of just show that this is the heritage of the place. Like obviously at Everton's new stadium, that's what they've got at Stanley Door Mox?
Stanley Matthews.
Stanley Moore Docks. That was it.
Yeah.
So I think that they could have done something like that. And it just feels when I was speaking to people about it just feels to me that they have wanted to do something that's so out of this world that people know it instantly as United Stadium. People know it as United Stadium clearly now if that goes ahead, but will they know it for good reasons? It feels like they'll be mocked. People compared it to a circus or Butlins.
I'm not mad on the design, to be honest with you. I do want a new stadium, but I'm not. I said I'm hoping it'll grow on me. Yeah. But I'm a bit like, really?
I just don't see what the 3 spikes produce or represent.
On the it's Bramley Moor Dock, by the way.
Bramley Moor, thank you.
I saw on that video that we were talking about before, it was like some very rough, basic sketches of like what it looked like, and one of them had 2 of the big towers rather than 3, and that looked a bit more Eye of Sauron kind of Lord of the Rings tower, but that didn't have the circus tent feel as much. It was the stadium like that with just 2 big spikes, one either side. So like you said, it does feel as though, or it is the case, that they kind of retrofitted the meaning onto the design, which then that does kind of feel like they have neglected, the idea of Manchester and of all these things. And you don't want it to be like fucking Man City. The amount of times they've got the yellow and black lines on it because it's like, what's it?
Hacienda. I didn't get that. So
come on, grow up. But let's move on a little bit. You don't want it to just be like, oh, this is the the Smiths stand or what. You don't want it to just be like a weirdly sort of homage kind of fancy dress Manchester. But it would be nice to have the design look a bit less kind of futuristic. It does look like one of the kind of Qatar World Cup stadiums, doesn't it? A little
and obviously they were involved in designing some of those.
Right. So they just do that then.
I mean, some people I've spoken to say they actually really like it. I've got friends that say
I've had a
really
few
like the look of it. So everyone's got their own taste. That's fine. I just think that it's such a significant moment for United that you want to make sure that they've thought things absolutely through. And the umbrella idea is obviously because of the 136 days of rain in Manchester.
I quite like
collecting that.
That feels like a nod to Manchester.
That's a nod to Manchester.
Yeah.
So, and they could reuse the water apparently for energy and things like that. So that's a nice sort of eco cycle. But I just feel like the actual stadium design doesn't feel like a football ground. It feels like, a spectacle to be observed.
Yeah, great.
Just one last question before we let you go. There's a lot of talk recently, I don't know if you've covered this or not, about Jadon Sancho.
Oh, yeah.
That perhaps he could end up back at United.
On other galactic...
Yeah, sorry, what was it?
Galactic goings on.
Goings on. I can't say that's your saying. Do you want to say it?
In other galactic goings on, Jadon Sancho.
No, thank you. There's this sort of, I wouldn't say rumour, but reports that maybe Chelsea could pay a fee not to take him. Do you think that's possible? Because it just seems to be gathering a little bit of momentum because he keeps going all these games without an assist or a goal.
Yeah.
I think he's like 14 games now, whatever it is, without a goal and assist. He's having some poor performances. I don't think there's a feeling that maybe Chelsea getting a bit lukewarm on the idea of signing him. Could you see that happening?
From what I'm told, that is it's a real clause. They could pay, but I mean, would they really want to pay to not have a player? It feels a bit.
When you say that, I'd say no immediately, but then I think it's Chelsea, and they seem a bit crazy by modern football standards in what they do.
Yeah, they'd have to pay even more to have someone they don't want.
Yeah,
someone said to you, "Here's this car here, 20 grand, you can have it. You test drive it, and while you're test driving it, it doesn't work and you don't like it." They go, well, you can either pay that 20 grand and keep this car that you don't like, or pay us 4 grand and you don't have to have it. You might be like, well, this car is useless to me.
Yeah.
Like, why would I pay 20 grand for something that isn't,
but he has been starting for him.
It's not like Maresca rates him, doesn't it? Maresca
but
obviously rates him because he picks him pretty much every game, like you said. And he has given him a lot of games, a lot of minutes. But I was mentioning this to Joe last night, and I watched the Arsenal-Chelsea game, and he didn't do anything. And I'm looking at him thinking, and I've seen Chelsea fans criticising him. I think after the Brighton game, he was getting hammered on socials. I know that doesn't say the full story, but there's obviously a reason behind it. And his numbers aren't there. So I think he initially got a few goals and a few assists, and the goal was against Spurs, which helped them, was it with 4-3, I think, or whatever it was. I think it was a Spurs game, I might be getting it wrong. But initially he did all right, and now he's done nothing. And I just feel like, because it's Chelsea as well,
clearly the fact that these stories are coming out mean that Chelsea are thinking about it, because they wouldn't be coming out otherwise. Everything that I've heard on it is that United would expect that deal still to go through, but clearly, the proof is in the pudding.
Do we know what region that fine or fee would be in?
Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I'll have to go and ask about, but you'd think it'd be a chunky bit of...
This feels like one of those things that's going to be like set the precedent for contracts going forward, where basically for you to pull out of this deal, it might cost, I don't know, I'm just pulling a number of 4 million out my arse, right? They might say
another
that's
galactic
worth
goings
it.
on.
Galactic goings on, yeah, nice.
But whereas like going forward, the penalty for not sticking to these obligations to buy would have to be the same as the transfer fee or something, because this is like, hang on a sec, we thought we were getting rid of a player we don't want, and you've given him back to us for a quarter or a tenth of the fee that we wanted in this deal. I wonder if, like, going forward, do you remember when, I can't remember, it was someone got a really good, like, every player in La Liga has to have a buyout clause, don't they, or something like that. And I think someone got a really good deal on someone, and after that everyone just got £1 billion transfer clauses. I feel like that could almost be one of those moments where you go, actually, why did we put that in there?
Yeah, you can sign him for 25 million, or you can give him back to us for 100 million.
Yeah, exactly. It costs him even more to keep him. It's just a mad situation.
It is mad. He's annoyed a lot of people, hasn't he, Jadon Sancho at United, with the way he's carried on, the whole freedom thing and all the rest of it. It is a bit sad the way his career's going, but he's got to take some responsibility for it. No one's forcing him to perform the way
he's had the chance at Chelsea, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And certainly I think, obviously Erik ten Hag was the manager, and clearly they had a big falling out over, his application from Erik ten Hag's point of view. Jadon Sancho obviously had his own views on that. But the club, I think, as a collective, took the decision to sell him. It wasn't an Erik ten Hag, led idea. It was certainly something United were absolutely on board with. So I'd be surprised to see him play for United again, for sure.
Right, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, Laurie. As always, it was excellent to chat to you.
Yeah, it was. And make sure you check out Laurie in The Athletic. There's a link in the description there. You can check out all the stories we've talked about and some more. Working on a few more as usual.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I've always got
contracts
going.
You're always up to summit, you, aren't you?
Contracts.
Contracts, all right.
Yeah, writing his little articles and that. No, brilliant, of course. Thank you very much for coming on. In other galactic goings on, we will be back, of course, later on with more stuff. So make sure you check that out. Thank you. Go and check out Laurie everywhere. where he is. We'll put the links in the description like Jay just said. Thank you once again, Laurie. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in a bit.